All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Edge of Chaos. I'm Neurotoxin, alongside Joe Ryan here.
Hello.
And, I'm completely burned out on this election 4 states in. But apparently Joe is not.
No, I am. Don't get me wrong.
He would like to make a few comments at the expense, regarding the Republican presidential candidates and their latest debate. So I hand it off to you, Joe.
I think in the last show when we said that the Republican debates kind of seemed like a prep school playground argument with cameras and an audience and a moderator, which CNN... Okay, can someone explain to me, is Wolf Blitzer a robot?
I've thought about that myself, actually.
Is Wolf Blitzer... Seriously, welcome to the debates. We're here in Houston, Texas. Here, the Republican candidates are going to square off, and we've actually had a very crazy race by the... he just can't... He doesn't talk like a human. I can't think of describing it any other way. He can't talk like a person. But then they have this debate, and it's patently obvious at CNN, which, by the way, is the dark horse for, the worst news network in existence. We all know that Fox... It's kind of like Fox is the Trump, of news networks. It's, okay, they're number one, but CNN is really vying hard for number 2.
I don't know. I've always hated CNN more. If we're going to touch on the media, let's touch on the media. And the reason I hate CNN more is that CNN is just pretty much biased against every one of my viewpoints. They're just centrist, authoritarian scum.
Yeah, it's pro-war, pro-business, whoever's in power. Yeah, every time there's war,
pro-corporate power more so than pro-business.
They're in love with drumming it up.
Union,
yeah,
pro-Republican establishment, pro-Democrat establishment. It's the reason I like to get my information from CNN is because I'm just equal opportunity pissed off when I do.
Right.
Whereas, I read Fox News and I'm pissed off, but it's okay, but I agree with this and that. And I read NBC, it's I'm pissed off and I agree with that. With CNN, I'm just pissed off all the way across. I don't like to be conflicted. It's bad for you.
And so they have this debate, and it's patently obvious that the whole point of it, this was the most egregious example of, let's set Trump up and he'll knock him down. We'll set him up, he'll knock him down. And literally, it was the 3 of them, and at one point the camera was just focusing on the 3 of them, meaning Trump, Cruz, and Rubio. And it was like Kasich and Carson weren't even there. And this was the one time where Carson was whining about his time, where he actually had a point. It's okay, wow, it was egregious how bad they were basically sucking on Trump's popularity in a desperate bid for ratings and relevance. It was ridiculous. And at several points during the debate itself, when they were literally just screaming at each other, and Wolf had lost all control. I think this was in the last half. He really didn't have any from the get-go. But this was this is a badly officiated football game where it's okay, they're literally just headhunting out there. They're just smashing into each other. This is not football anymore. This is a fight. You know what I mean? Someone's got to get control of this game, and nobody did. They were just literally all talking at the same time, yelling at each other. And at several points during that debate, I literally was contemplating renouncing American citizenship. I'm I'm not even kidding you. The mere idea that one of these 3 morons would ever hold elected office, let alone President of the United States, that's horrifying. Not only that, who's going to sail in and stop them? Hillary, Rodham, Clinton. Kill me now. Please kill me now.
Okay, so before we even get to the Democrats, Joe, I have to disagree with you a little bit. And this is really more of a sociological disagreement than a political disagreement. I'm clearly not a fan of any of these 3 guys. If I had to pick one, I'd pick Cruz, but I'm not a fan of him. But you have to, when you're dealing with a bully, which is what Trump is, he's a conceited, unhinged bully. I have yet to see him say one substantive thing in his entire presidential campaign.
Agreed.
And I honestly think that's a distinction he holds. I don't think we've ever had a major presidential candidate that has not said one concrete, substantial policy proposal.
No, totally.
He gets up there and basically says that he's going to sail into office and just magically fix everything.
It'll be great.
What's the company that was moving the
Carrier, Ford,
right?
And Carrier, yeah.
Well, if you talk to them right, you can get them not to move. If you just look at Mexico right, we can build a wall or force them to pay for it. It's Donald, what planet are you on?
Yeah, they asked him specifically, how would you do that? And he didn't have an answer. He's basically, I just will.
He never does. He never
I just
does.
will. How? Oh, well, we have a trade deficit, so you're going to go into a trade war with a NAFTA partner, so you're going to rip that up. Okay. He didn't even say that, by the way, like you would have to. But yeah, and here's the thing. I know where you're going with this. I don't disagree with the fact that they had to punch him, and I don't disagree with the fact that they should have done it sooner. Because now it's to the point where it's too little too late. This is a runaway train now. And the Republican establishment and every single person who was laughing up to this point, they're not laughing anymore, are they? And that included me and you at one point. No, I'm not laughing anymore. Get this fucking guy out of the race. But it's too late, I think. That's what I'm afraid of.
Well, I don't know. So here's the thing. There's more to it than that. First of all, I may think he's ridiculous. But I understand why he's winning. Or I wouldn't even say it's winning. Here's another news flash for all the morons saying, oh, Trump is uncatchable now. You have to win by majority. You have to get a majority of the delegates. You don't win by getting a plurality. It's not like the popular vote in actual elections. So even though he's ahead, and people might not be able to get ahead of him, it's highly unlikely that he'd get a majority. And if he doesn't get a majority, he's not winning because no one else is giving him their delegates. Now, Kasich and Carson need to get the fuck out. Because if they do, you notice how the field's thinned out and Trump's numbers have not improved at all?
That is interesting. I will say that. And by the way, I am a moron because I did just say it's almost inevitable. But it's more of a fear, I'm saying. But anyhow, yeah. Anyway.
Right. So
he's leading in all the other states almost.
He got Nevada by a huge margin, but everywhere else, it's about the same number. It's around 30%. It's just that the field still hasn't thinned out. So, if anything, you still can't help but laugh at just how badly the Republican Party has eaten itself.
It has. No, totally.
Like, no. Those fucks deserve it. Like, I don't want Donald Trump, but those fucks still deserve it. It's like, you guys have fucked yourselves up so badly that Donald Trump is beating you.
Right. But with 35% of the vote.
Right. The reason he's getting votes, I still stick by what I've said all along. Probably about half of his supporters are people who normally would not vote at all. They're newcomers. And they're seeing this stupidity, this just unhinged bullying, and this just, I know what, I'm just going to say a bunch of shit that everyone wants to hear, just populism that has no substance. I mean, how many Americans actually understand that he has no substantive policy proposals?
I would say about the 35% that are voting for him. I would say literally.
Well, they're not 35% of Americans, 35% of the Republican primary
voters. Those
guys.
It's
nowhere
they
near.
Don't.
But what I'm saying is he's bringing people out that are like, yeah, we need someone who's not a politician. Well, do you need someone to fix your toilet that's not a plumber? Like, I'm not a fan of politicians, but they have to understand what they're doing. Again, thankfully, it's only 30% of one party. So clearly, if the party weren't a complete disaster and hadn't self-destructed from the inside, this wouldn't be happening. It's just that divide. So with that in mind, I think they're finally figuring out we have to break this guy down. And the only way to beat this guy, the only way to beat a bully, is to punch him in the mouth. You cannot take the high road. Because there's just way too many stupid people that are going to say he's winning because he's screaming the loudest. It's reality. I know no one wants to hear it. I mean, I'm an intellectual. I don't like bullies. I don't want Donald Trump to win. But it's reality. As an intellectual, you still have to punch bullies in the mouth.
Yeah, and the only downside is I can't picture Ted and Marco punching very hard. I picture them more limply slapping. But, maybe it'll be enough. I don't know.
Especially Marco.
I mean, Marco Rubio, he was supposed to be a joke back in the summer. He was like, oh, he won't win, but he'll end up being a VP or something. That was what a lot of the analysts said. And now he's their best hope. We're in strange times, people. Strange times.
Yeah, I mean, the Republican Party is, like I said, they're done. They're done regardless.
Totally. And right behind that, I think the Democratic Party is only one cycle behind total destruction of the Republicans.
This is what's going to, if they don't get the White House, this is what's going to happen.
The Democratic Party's done after this election, I think. I really do think that.
Well, right. I mean, I think one more cycle, and this is definitely going to happen to them, especially if they don't win the White House. But on that note, what happened to Bernie Sanders?
I don't think anything happened. I think it's just everyone's realizing how impossible this is. And here's here's the answer to the question. He's not turning it out. He's not turning the votes out. Now, one might say, and when people have said, well, his fatal flaw is that he's really popular, but he's really popular amongst the least active demographic of voters, young people. They don't traditionally turn out, and they're not.
I am starting to think that that's really not what's happening here. Like, we and I have had this conversation in private, and we should have it on the podcast. I think people find it interesting, even if we don't agree entirely. I feel like I'm hearing a lot of media talking about how Hillary is bringing out minorities and poor people. I don't buy it.
Well, there aren't that many voters. That's what I was saying. Like, the Democrat turnout is very low, and so right. Bernie's been saying, if it's low, we don't win. If it's high, we do. And he's right. He's just not winning. Right. So it's because it's not high.
So those So this is a very important thing to keep in mind, that the poor and minorities are not turning out. Period. Right. That right there is disaster for the Democratic Party come the generals.
And all they're quoting, quoting is that the percent of people who do. Of those minorities that are, she's getting them X amount.
6 out of 10 black people turned out for Hillary. Yeah, but there was only 10 black people that voted.
Right.
Right. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, absolutely. So those margins, when you look at those margins, you have to look at how many people that are in that demographic actually voted. Because otherwise, it's not really representative. And the media loves to misrepresent this to make Hillary look inevitable. If there's one person they're still in love with, it's Hillary.
Oh, totally.
But that being said, now, are we really surprised, first of all, that Hillary won in South Carolina?
Well, nobody is, but I think it was the whole thing of, well, how badly is she going to beat him was going to be the question. Margin. And it was really bad. So that's not good for Bernie.
I'm usually the guy. I'm very data-driven. I'm very empirical, and I like to predict these things just based on numbers. And I'm very good at it because I'm very good at accounting for everything. But I think in this cycle, it's just impossible to do, especially with the Democrats. Like, this election showed me that it's impossible. This specific primary in South Carolina. We have Super Tuesday coming up. Most of the polls are months old, and it's impossible to know which way it's going to go. You were saying before the podcast, I'm calling it, but I don't know. It could very well turn around simply because people see this. They see how badly Bernie just did in South Carolina. He actually didn't do that bad in Nevada at all. They're making a big deal out of it.
No, she only won by like 4.5%.
Right, she got like 3 more delegates than he did.
Yeah.
But, so all of these states, it's quite possible this actually brings a lot of turnout for him. But what I think has happened, honestly, this is purely observation. This is purely qualitative research. I'm not citing any numbers. I can very well be wrong. It seems to me that people looked at this, Democrats, because this has nothing to do with Republicans, and said, wow, a socialist is actually vying for the nomination. And I really feel that as a country, even Democrats, even most Democrats, are not ready for that. There's a few states where that's very popular. New Hampshire,
Vermont,
Massachusetts, right? So New England, yes. Everywhere else, no. In the South, this has nothing to do with the Republican Party, so don't come at us, oh, well, that's just conservatives. No, this is the Democratic primary. Still, Bernie just cannot turn out people for socialism. And, I've been saying for months he really needs to fixate on his social policies, because that'll get him libertarian votes. That'll get him anyone that's just pissed off at the system.
Yeah.
But he's coming out...
The millionaires and billionaires thing, that's been his hook, though, from day one,
Right, he's come out and just screaming free shit, basically. And I hate to say it, but his economic platform, in my opinion, flat insanity. Flat insanity. I'm okay with him. I like him because I realize it has no chance of actually becoming law. None of it. Would not, even if Democrats take Congress, because Democrats clearly are not on board with this. So that's why I'm okay with it, because that's the only thing about him I don't like, and it's not happening. But I'm sorry, even most libertarians are not going to have my understanding of civics. So I can see why, now that he's actually becoming mainstream, he's just being thoroughly rejected.
Well, and not only that, it wasn't expected he would do well in the South anyhow. I mean, this is the land not long ago, within a generation, of the Southern Democrats were the ones who wanted to keep blacks and whites separate. Your George Wallace's, your Strom Thurmond's, correct? I mean, it wasn't that long ago. So yeah, the Democratic Party runs pretty conservative down south. Always has. So I get that. That was predicted that she would do better than him, and she is. But I think it's more of a depressing fact that I think most people are just staying home because, like you, I think most people figure that he's not going to get over the hump, so to speak, with voters. And so why bother even going to the polls? He's not going to win anyhow. Not to mention the fact this is an upstart candidate against an incestuous system that rewards the establishment candidate no matter who's running against who. And, and she happens to be the most slimy, connected Democrat in the land, aside from old Bill. So it's like, that she's going to pull every dirty trick out of the book that she can, and they are, to get to win. And they have the connections to make it happen in the end.
But on that note, Democrats listening to this podcast, just so you understand, you do understand that nominating Hillary will lose you the White House.
Oh, she's done. If it's Hillary versus Trump, we better prepare for President Trump. Period. I'm calling it. Yeah.
I mean, Trump.
That's what horrifies me.
Is the one. Yeah, I know. That is that. I mean,
he's her worst nightmare. He is her worst nightmare because not only can he bring up everybody that's buried, and he knows them.
Oh, yeah.
He's friends with them. Let's not forget he knows them intimately, like better than any other candidate. He's like hung out with them. So he knows all their secrets. Does he give one fuck about bringing every single one of them up? We're gonna. Oh, no. It'll be like the '90s, remember when show this election. It'll be remember Vince Foster, remember Whitewater, remember Lewinsky, remember Paula Jones, remember. Oh my God, it's gonna be endless. How the fuck can any campaign keep up with all of that? And she's going to have to answer for every single thing he did. And there's a long list, people. Trust me.
And, I won't feel one just bit of sympathy for her. She deserves it. If anyone deserves
she's the slimiest politician I know. Yeah.
Into the ground by Trump, it's Hillary. But then we get President Trump.
Trump. Let that sink in for a minute, people.
I can't.
Let it sink in.
I feel that it's highly likely that there is going to be some kind of third-party run.
Bloomberg?
No, not Bloomberg. Because if there's any nonpartisan politician, that's just more similar to both Trump and Hillary than they are to each other, it's Bloomberg. It's just
he was going to run if Hillary loses
versus left-wing fascism versus just pure fascism.
Yeah, he was going to run if Hillary lost. He was going to be the.
He's not.
Yeah,
I don't think he's going to run. I'm saying more like a Bernie Sanders third-party run or a Ted Cruz third-party run.
Ted Cruz,
and of course, whichever side. Well, somebody might not be Ted Cruz, but it's just the thing is both parties are so split that whoever gets nominated from either side is going to have a really difficult time.
There's going to be like 30 to 40% going, fuck you, we're never voting for you. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So that creates the climate for a third-party run. And if you look at history in this country, that's when third-party runs happen.
Teddy Roosevelt, right.
Which, honestly, I want a third-party run, because if it's Hillary versus Trump, Jesus Christ, I'm going to nominate my cat.
Yeah, no matter who wins that election, the loser is America.
Oh, honestly. Yeah. Which is what I'm saying. I'm going to nominate my cat if it's those two, because he's got a better chance.
I'd probably vote for him.
Yeah, shit. I mean...
Could I swallow my pride and vote Hillary against Trump? Maybe that would be the only way I would vote for Hillary, was against Trump.
Thing.
But...
It doesn't matter who you vote for. You're in Texas.
You know what I'm reminded of? I told you this off the podcast, but this really reminds me of back before Dennis Miller went insane. And 9/11 made him insane. Anyways... he used to have a show on HBO, and he would get on, and he'd do a monologue, he'd like talk about the news and laugh and make jokes. And then during the 2000 election, which was more entertaining than people remember, before Bush v. Gore happened, he was talking about all the various goings on and all the primaries and this and that, because it was an open primary, just like this one. And by the time it was over and it was settled on Bush versus Gore, the most boring of all the possibilities, as usual, I remember he got up on his show. Like, he would always do a one-line joke and then to the intro and then do more of a monologue after the intro. So he came up and he was like, so it's going to be Bush versus Gore in the election in November. That's the joke, folks. Bam. And it's just like, wow. Just monotone, flat. It's like, yeah, that was the joke, wasn't it? And yeah, it turned out to be a shit election.
Well, I have to disagree with you. Hillary versus Trump would be very, very entertaining.
No, it's not. It's going to be like being beaten by a sack of oranges. It's going to be every fucking day. Hillary, she's the most corrupt, lying politician I know. And Bill, and so it's just going to be every fucking day with this. You're going to have to see his fat, bloated face on TV every day. talking about some other
what's going to change? Hold on. What's going to change?
It's not going to stop, I guess.
It's not. And then at
the end of it, you see the fat, bloated face with his right hand up going, I swear to uphold the Constitution and make it better and huger and blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, my God. Can I renounce American citizenship now? God almighty.
I don't know. I don't know where this is going, but it's going to be interesting. It's definitely a time we have not lived through.
No.
Now, I really wanted to address, and one of the reasons I brought up Bernie Sanders, and just, in my opinion, the insanity of his campaign and his policy proposals. Now, obviously, I'm not in favor of socialism. That's not what this is about. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of propaganda against Bernie Sanders that just basically just paints socialism as being of the devil the way we used to in the 60s.
Oh, it's a very Red Scare type of deal, yeah.
There's that. But on the other extreme, I'm seeing a lot of his supporters with just phenomenal ignorance, not even of economics, but phenomenal ignorance of all those countries where socialism allegedly works, of how it works there. And I really would like to educate our listeners on this a little bit, just because I feel like it's important. And I vote for whoever you want. I just feel this is very important information to impart. And the first place I want to start is something very interesting that you said on your individual podcast that you do now, where you were talking about the man that had the makeshift sling. Would you like to remind our listeners about that just briefly?
Yeah, this guy, he had no insurance and broke his arm, and he basically is fixing it in his own backyard because he doesn't have health insurance.
Right. And you were talking about, he was a fast food worker, right?
Yes.
That you encountered. And he was about how old? 40-ish, you said?
Yeah, he was older than me. I would say about his 40s, give or take.
Right. Early middle age. So
he might have been late 30s, but yeah, give or take.
Here's my take. And one thing, you said that I don't necessarily appreciate about libertarians is that, or just economic conservatives in general, is that we just think that, oh, well, this person can't afford health care, and therefore they don't deserve it, and they deserve to live this way. That's really not the case. For example, I'm a libertarian, and I can maybe see where, like, okay, if someone's genuinely lazy, and they're not doing anything, and they're just want to subsist and freeload off the system, okay, maybe you can make a case for people like that from a libertarian perspective. This is a person that has a job.
Right.
This is a person that goes to work every day. They're trying to support their family. I'm not saying they should live in a mansion. I'm not saying they should be rich, but you're absolutely right. They should be able to access health care. That's a basic need. I mean, you have a job, you should be able to pay for housing, food, healthcare. This is not the Middle Ages.
And that's what Bernie's really saying in a lot of his rhetoric, by the way.
Okay, so that's what he's saying ideologically. But let's look at the reality, the economic reality in this country. So, healthcare, whether you like to admit it or not, is a domain of economics. It works on supply and demand. And what we have in this country, if we take away the subsidies and we take away all the government intervention and we actually leave healthcare in I'm not going to say free market because that's not what's going on. If we leave it without the economic subsidies provided by government, even before Obamacare, maybe 40% of this country will be able to access healthcare. Because the price of healthcare in this country is just so outrageous. And this has nothing to do with insurance. If you think I'm talking about insurance, it's just plain American ignorance. If you look at the kind of countries that we usually get compared to, France, Britain, the Netherlands, Denmark, in those countries, healthcare costs are about 1/5, maybe 1/4, depending on what it is, of ours. And most of them, Britain being the exception, most of them actually have private health care. The providers are private, the doctor's offices are private, the hospitals are private, the equipment manufacturers, the pharmaceutical companies, the pharmacies, they're all private. They're not government run. That's a big misconception. It's simply inaccurate. Look it up. Britain's the exception, yes. And in those countries, the cost, if you go to the doctor, it costs about the equivalent of $40, $50 to see a doctor. That's not unreasonable. That's what it costs to fill up a tank of gas in a large truck, or at least it did, until the gas prices went down.
I think that depends on the country, by the way.
Right? No. Look it up. All of those countries, it's about the healthcare costs are 4 to 5 times less than they are here.
No. I meant the fee to see a doctor. I mean, I just empirically, I've talked to people that's like, oh, I broke an arm when I was visiting so and so. I think the example was Canada. It's like I just got it set and I walked away. That's it. Done. No
Okay.
no cash changed hands.
No. Hold on. Okay, no. We're going... See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is what the doctor gets paid for a visit, not what you pay when you go to the doctor. The cost of providing the healthcare, not about who pays it. These are two different things.
I gotcha.
There's the cost of healthcare, and there's who pays for it. You understand? I want our listeners to understand this difference.
It's a good difference. I get it.
Yeah, when you mesh these two things together, that's where the mistakes happen. So the reason healthcare is so much cheaper in those countries is because, ready for this? In the U.S., it's way more regulated than it is in Europe or in Canada.
I believe that.
Right. We like to think of ourselves as this huge free market economy where anything goes and it's best man for the job.
Not true.
But with healthcare, that's simply not the case. If you believe that about the United States, you simply don't know what you're talking about.
When I was staying focused in my little story, by the way, on this one guy, but you're right, there's a lot of little rabbit holes to go down. I don't know where you were going to start. Eventually, I want to tackle the AMA, but you go ahead and start.
Right, well, we'll get to that. But you mentioned that we are surrounded by care. That's one of the things, and that's plain not true. If you look at the numbers, how many doctors we have in this country, licensed physicians and MDs, per capita, how many hospital beds, how many equipment manufacturers, how many pharmacies, how many types of pharmaceutical drugs, and how many types of procedures are available. Per capita, it's a joke.
Well,
it's like
I'm a little unique. I was talking in kind of factual terms. Literally, I'm within a 5-minute drive of 2 pretty big hospitals. It's just unique to where I was.
You understand, it's not about how many hospitals you see. It's about numbers. It's about statistics. How many do you have per capita? And it's just this massive, artificially created supply shortage. I mean, I've worked in healthcare for about 10 years. I'm very familiar with this industry.
Well, that's true. And like a city like LA, way worse. Let's say there's very few hospitals for the amount of people there.
Right. There's simply not enough. And here's the thing. Another issue, so there's quantitative and then there's also qualitative. It's what we consider medicine. There's about 6 schools of medicine in the world that are recognized as different types of medicine. There's more than one way to practice medicine. There's Chinese medicine. There's Indian medicine, right? And these are all things that are empirically proven to work. I'm not talking about hoodoo homeopathy. Nothing like that.
Putting crystals on you to heal your chakras?
That's crap. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about things that are empirically proven to work. But in the U.S., we really only recognize one school. So all of those other things are perfectly available. They're completely available. You can go. They're not illegal. You can go to a doctor that's not considered a medical doctor by the United States government or licensed by the state. It's legal to see them. It's legal for them to practice. The problem is insurance doesn't pay for it.
Yeah, you pay for it. Yeah, out of pocket,
right.
Whatever it is.
So this is where it becomes an issue. So these doctors, what's considered medicine, we have a tremendous artificial supply shortage. And I believe you wanted to address where that comes from, so please go ahead, AMA and all that.
Well, the AMA, and I think you might be better at the history of it, because there was something we were discussing off the show as well, but basically it keeps an artificial cap on how many doctors get into med school every year, basically, right, among the many things they do, but they basically keep artificially the amount of doctors at a certain level, because why? Well, if there's fewer of them, the ones that are there make more money. So pretty obvious, interest level there to basically keep it kind of an exclusive echelon of life.
Right.
I think it's kind of amazing that just exists and we don't even acknowledge that it's there, but it has a direct effect on everything.
Well, the same thing happens with the FDA and pharmaceutical manufacturers and equipment manufacturers. It's really kind of the same thing. The amount of hoops that you have to jump through to get medications or equipment approved in this country, it's insanity. It's unmatched by anything else anywhere else in the world.
I can speak to that because I have sleep apnea.
Right.
And getting a fucking machine is a pain in the ass, to the point in Texas where I'm not even going through my insurance. I'm buying it off Amazon.
Right, and you also spoke about your friend who passed away a few years ago with his wheelchairs. Same thing.
Yes.
So something you mentioned on your individual show was that it's expensive because there's a profit motive. Well, there is a profit motive, but there's also a huge supply restriction. profit motive drives prices down in an actual free market where if you're making a lot of money making something, I'm going to start making it cheaper so I can compete with you and make money. But if you're allowed to make it, and if I start making it, Uncle Government's going to come and stop me, kind of like there's an episode of South Park that covers this, actually, where Mr. Garrison he basically invents
the machine where you're blowing the machine to instead of flying.
You're moving, right? Well, it's South Park, but it's basically it's supposed to be the Segway, but it's before the Segway happened. And in the end, the government comes and shuts him down on behalf of the airlines,
right?
For like no reason, they just say, "Yep, we're shutting you down because you're causing a profit crisis on the airlines," just like that.
One place where I'm going to disagree with you on your analysis is that the particulars of people like my friend and people worse off than him, because he was actually more functional than a lot of people, is that a lot of the chairs that are sold to people like them aren't scalable, one size fit all. That's the whole point. They're kind of one shot. They're each tailored specifically to their particular limitations. And so it's not like you have model XGV over here for him. No, it's a lot of times they take kind of a model that has very general specifications and sort of tweak it and modify it, personalize it,
then custom wheelchairs. And I worked with DDs for 5 years, and I know a lot about custom wheelchairs. And again, I know the amount of hoopla that you have to go through, even through insurance, to get one of those approved.
Quite a bit
for them to be considered a medical necessity. It's like, really?
Even to a person who can't literally move under their own power, you have to, I have to have a chair. Well, why? Because otherwise I'm sitting in the corner of the room in a bed all day long?
And it's not just having a chair, it's having all those modifications as part of it, too.
Oh, they cost, like I said, it's 25, 30 grand sometimes for these chairs. It's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. So moving on with this, when you have the costs this high, so in Europe, in the countries we've listed, with the cost of healthcare being what it is, not the cost of insurance, the cost of healthcare. If you take away the insurance, right, if you take that away, just going to a doctor, I'm not talking like surgeries or emergency room visits, going to a doctor, most people are going to be able to afford it. You're going to have maybe 6 to 10% of the population that are poor, that are unable to afford it, right? In this country, you're easily going to be over 50%. So by that notion, yes, a lot of those countries have socialized health insurance, where it's single payer, although it's a little bit more complicated than that in some of them. But even though it's single payer, the costs are reasonable. So you have, disproportionate amount of taxes paid by different people, and yes, the taxes are way more disproportionate in those countries. But the costs are still reasonable. You're really only carrying the weight of about 6 to 10% that are not able to fend for themselves. If we did that in this country, which is what Obamacare tries to do and which is what Bernie Sanders is talking about doing, you're going to bankrupt the government instantly. Because you're taking this just horrendously over-regulated market with a huge supply restriction, where they're able to price gouge because there's simply too few providers and too few everything else, and the regulatory bodies are on board. And you're saying, okay, now it's not just a mandate to buy insurance. Now you're tax funded. Here's a blank treasury check.
Well, and I would hope that Bernie, and he hasn't gotten into this in detail, and I don't know if that's because, as you suggest, he would only do one and not the other, but I look at the system like you were saying, oh, well, they're keeping costs down and they're socializing the insurance. I'm like, great, when can we do both of those things here? And I'll throw a bomb into this discussion for one to kind of stir it a little bit. I saw the Michael Moore movie, Where to Invade Next, recently. Have you seen this movie yet?
Which one? Where to Invade Next?
Yeah, his newest movie. It just came out.
I don't typically watch Michael Moore movies because, I don't like to be made nauseous.
And it's like full-on propaganda. Like, I understand that, but it is interesting. And there's obviously, cons to these things that he doesn't talk about in the movie. But the basic idea is he goes and, quote-unquote, invades countries and brings back good things about them to us and makes some American ideas. Things like he goes to Italy and he talks about how they get 7 weeks paid leave a year. Or he goes to...
Has he seen what's happening to their economy? Or
he goes to France and he's talking about how much better the school lunches are for the kids. He goes to, I think...
School lunches. That's what makes a great country.
It was interesting what they were eating, though. It was a lot healthier. Anyway, he goes to, Finland, talks about the healthcare system.
Michael Moore was talking about eating healthy?
Obviously, he needs to start, just like I do.
He needs to go to France. Yeah, okay.
Obviously.
You know, Michael, go to France. I'll pay for the plane ticket.
He goes to Sweden and he looks at the prisons and how much more kinder or gentler they are in that regard. It is interesting to see some of the things just in that regard. I mean, I'm watching it with a skeptical eye, obviously, but you were discussing with me the other day about education and how well you have to go into tracks and all that for the free college. It's it's a lot more regulated, and I'm like, okay.
I want to get into
it doesn't
that.
sound so horrible, and I guess some of those things.
Hold on. I have not seen, to answer your very first point that you made, without the Michael Moore stuff, I have not seen anything in Bernie Sanders' platform that indicates he's going to replace, essentially, the healthcare provision system with any one of Europe's. He's talking about keeping it as is, maybe cracking down on the FDA a little bit in Big Pharma, but that's it, none of the others.
Well, the term is Medicare for all. I mean, what does that entail? Doesn't that entail
Medicare
cost
for
controls?
All is just a tax-funded, single-payer plan without addressing costs. And I feel like health insurance companies really get an unfairly bad reputation in this system.
I don't.
Because when those are the costs, they really, if you look at their profit margins, they really make very little money per capita.
Really?
It's just, yes, look it up. They cannot bring down the costs of healthcare. You need health insurance. See, health insurance, in my opinion, doesn't matter if the government does it or if private industry does it. You do need risk pools because certain things in healthcare are always going to be egregiously expensive and you're not going to be prepared for them, like emergency room visits and surgeries. Those are the things you do need a risk pool for. There's nothing wrong with a risk pool. Now, if you're going to have government-run risk pools, you really shouldn't have a single one, in my opinion, for a country this size and this diverse. But the problem is not government versus private. The problem is larger versus smaller, for one. But also, in this case, we have these egregious costs that no one ever talks about. And then we blame the risk pool. Oh, look, it's all the private insurance companies. Let's switch to Medicare for all. Nothing's going to change. Nothing is going to change. You're not going to have more doctors. You're not going to have more hospitals. You're not going to have more emergency rooms. You're not going to have more equipment manufacturers. You're not going to have more medicine available. What you're going to do, one is you're going to completely guarantee these corporations a blank check that are just completely enabled by regulations done by their own lobbyists in their favor. Kind of like Wall Street, very similarly. No one realizes this is going on in healthcare. Two, you're just going to have humongous lines even for the simplest services. Because now it's available to everyone. We're just going to all be miserable in our equality. And again, if Bernie Sanders were actually going to address the costs, I'd have a lot more respect for him. I'm not a big fan of the European system, but it's a lot better than ours in this sense. Our healthcare it's god-awful.
Well, that's what I mean. I'm in favor of that. I think, even though we disagree about it. If it's better, let's do it.
He's just talking about... Right, but his proposal is just to tax the rich to pay for this. That's not going to work. And that brings me to, that's pretty much, in my opinion, I've actually looked into his platform in detail for this. Pretty much everything else that I see him doing. I see him doing the same thing with education. You can go ahead. What were you going to say about that? I'm sorry.
It was interesting, actually. He goes to Slovenia, Michael Moore, and he talks to Americans who traveled to Slovenia to go to school, and because it's free. And because they offer, in response to all the migration, I guess, of English speakers going there, 110, I think it was, different classes that are actually taught in English, even though it's in Slovenia. And it was like, oh yeah, I was getting crushed by debt, so I came here and it's free. And I can just go and learn, and it's great. It's like, it's kind of interesting. But, how can they do it? But obviously, college here, it's become a ridiculous industry unto itself. It really has.
Oh yeah.
With the government now being the pimp of college debt, where it used to be the banks and we could just blame them for being greedy. So if the government's making interest off of everybody, crushing everyone in debt, aren't they the greedy ones now? I mean, it makes you wonder.
Well, right. So in a sense, you kind of have Medicare for all now. You have an example of what that's going to look like with student loans now being controlled by government. How's that?
Well, and they haven't done it. I mean, that proves your point, and I'm not even disagreeing with that. We need to bring costs down. We need to bring.
So let's talk about college costs. Another thing I really want to talk about, because I think it's even more ridiculous than healthcare. Because honestly, regulation has nothing to do with this. Not with this. It's simply, I was 18 and I was stupid, and you were 18 and you were stupid.
Oh, I know I was.
Share any personal stories, but I remember some of the financial decisions that you made when you were 18.
Yeah, me too. So does the bankruptcy court of San Diego County.
What'd you say?
And so does the bankruptcy court.
Right. And for me, it wasn't so much financial decisions, it was more academic decisions, how long I stayed in college, right? And the classes I took and all that.
Right.
So
Yeah, well, you
when
didn't
you're
know what you
18,
wanted to do at the
19
beginning.
Right.
And I didn't
I'm
either. That's
sorry.
why I didn't go.
Right. Right, but you got into debt in other ways,
Right.
So when you're 18, 19 years
You're
old,
stupid.
I'm sorry, maybe there's exceptions, but as a general rule, you have no fucking idea how to deal with money, and you don't know what you want to be when you grow up because you haven't yet.
Right.
So there was a time when if you went to college and you didn't know, first of all, a lot fewer people went to college at that time. Let's start with that.
Yes, they did.
But secondly, basically people didn't go to college until they knew what they wanted to do. And college cost money, but it was not this ridiculously expensive. And then I'm kind of fuzzy on all the specific history. I mean, student loans have been around for a very long time, for decades. But there was a time, I believe it was actually under Ronald Reagan, where someone had this bright idea, let's federally subsidize interest on student loans. And it was supposed to be a little bit.
Yeah.
It was supposed to help people, who can't afford college. Does it sound familiar? There's something vaguely familiar about this. Right?
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of different things that are contributing to costs right now. That might be one of them.
No. Student loans are the number one problem here.
But states have jacked like community college rates just to finance their deficits. I know California has done that. They keep just raising those rates because they can.
Again, you're right, but what's enabling them to do that? See, again, even though these are government schools, price is still price. The laws of economics still apply. If you jack your prices to the point where your customers cannot afford to pay them, you're going to go out of business. This does not stop when government is the provider.
Well, to me, I think that all they're doing is blowing a bubble. It may be a 30-year-long bubble.
But they're enabled in this affair by the fact that no one pays their own way through college anymore. They don't pay it. Their parents don't pay it. When it comes to education, I use the number 50 to 60% wouldn't be able to access it with healthcare. With education, it's more like 80 or 90 at this point.
Oh, it's
because
insane.
The prices have just become so outrageous. And we're not talking, if you want to go to an Ivy League school, I understand that being expensive. We're talking about the CSU system. We're talking about California's community colleges. This is insane. These are public universities.
You used to be able to go to a state college and flip burgers, part time to pay for it. Not anymore. It's like if you worked a full time job and went to college full time, you might be able to keep, but probably not.
No, you would not.
If you had no other expenses.
If you already if you learn a trade first and you're making decent money, then not with a college job, even full time. It's not happening. And it's because, again, we look at this backwards. We look at, they're jacking up prices. No, so that's why it's expensive. No, they're jacking up prices because no matter where you put the prices, people are going to be able to pay for it because they're enabled by, in the past, by government subsidized debt, and now just by government run debt. Now, if we look at debt, anytime we enable people to borrow money they can't borrow, terrible things happen.
2008
Anyone
being a key
remember
example.
the housing bubble? Anybody?
Yeah.
Bueller?
Yeah. Well, the college debt bubble is the next one. That's what people keep saying because it's unsustainable that you're turning out people the $30, $40, $50, $60, $80,000 in debt that takes them 25 years to pay off when our whole economic system is basically based on consuming things, buying cars, buying houses. They're not going to be able to do that, and already the statistics are skewing that people in our generation now are getting married later or not at all, buying houses later or not at all, not buying new cars. Like all this sharing economy shit, it's really just sprung up from the fact that people can't afford to do any of that shit anymore.
Right.
And the statistics are our generation is going to be worse off than the one before it. And that's the first time that's happened in this country. So that's kind of what Bernie's running on. But maybe some of the policies need to be tweaked a little bit.
So, but now, again, his proposal is to jack up taxes and simply say, okay, you know what? Forget the debt. College is free now. Well, first of all, that in no way reduces the costs because the federal government does not run any colleges. They're either state or they're private. And again, the federal government does not run them. It cannot dictate prices. So prices may go down, but they're not going to go down instantly. And especially, in fact, I don't think they're going to go down at all because now you're just, again, enabled by a blank check. The more students you get, the more your budget is. And that's how high school works in this country. It's not at the federal level, but they get funding for attendance.
Well, he said free public. He said free public college. So I think he's speaking to
so I'm sorry, not
your
okay,
UCs,
so
your
it's just
CSUs, community colleges, etc.
Okay, so
That he can kind of control, with the mechanisms of the federal government.
How would he control prices on state colleges as the president?
Wouldn't you, let's say, it would be the kind of federal overreach that you would probably not like. Couldn't you just basically give them an X amount of money and saying, divide it up thusly, and that's it? You're not getting anything
else. So there would
else.
have to be block grants.
Right.
There would have to be a mechanism in place. And as far as I know right now, there's not. Like, a lot of colleges get money for research, but they really don't get a lot of, like, tuition assistance type stuff. So you would have to pass that law. It's not getting through Congress.
Well, there is money that comes to fund colleges directly to states, but states dole it out right now, right? There is some money that comes down.
I don't think that there is. There's really definitely not a lot. It's definitely at the state level that this is done. You're thinking there's research money for academic research. For student support for running actual education, not so much.
It would be an interesting tactic.
Some, but it's very little. It
would be an interesting tactic if he gets a law through that basically taxes their revenue off of sports to fund educational programs.
Okay, but see, now you're talking about jacking up taxes. But these are laws that have to get passed.
Yep.
So if you just flip this in the existing system, which is what I see Bernie trying to do, raise taxes and just flip the existing system to be tax funded. It's a handout to some of the worst interests in America. You have to change the regulations. You have to change the structural system, not just jack up taxes to fund what's not working.
Well, I think that even Bernie would agree with that.
Oh, maybe he would agree, but
I don't think he can get that wonky in his speeches. He's talking to young people. I don't think they get that deep into it like we do.
Okay, and this is another podcast where Joe the Progressive makes all my libertarian points for me. An idiot like Donald Trump.
Think about it. We are in the election of Donald Trump, where it's literal just 20-second sound bites. I'm going to get a wall, I'm going to build it, and I'm going to have Mexico pay for it, and it's going to be huge, it's going to be awesome, it's going to be great. It's like, what the fuck are you even talking about? Like,
right.
Seriously.
You know what? If there's a poster child for limited government...
Oh, my good God.
Donald Trump is
Okay, I want to pivot back to Mr. Trump a little.
For birth control, he's it too.
Yeah.
But
let's not forget, what was the last thing he just said? He wants to make it easier basically to sue anyone in the press he disagrees with. He's Hitler. He's fucking Hitler. He is. He wants to kick out all the brown people. He wants to throw journalists in jail. Like, seriously, this guy left unchecked, it's insanity. It's insanity.
Again, my point is, this is the kind of shit that if you let pure populist democracy work, this is what it boils down to. Because people are ignorant, and they don't understand what they're dealing with. Whereas Bernie Sanders, I don't know whether he has these policy ideas, but let's assume he does. And you hit the nail on the head. Even though most of his followers, that I know anyway, they're intellectuals. Even the young people, they're college students. They're people who are smart, people who are paying attention. And still, you're right. If he were to actually come in with these wonky speeches, it'd be over the heads of probably 60, 70% of his followers.
Yeah. Or they're just boring them to death.
This is why you can't have government do this, because you cannot trust democracy with it. Now, going to just really quickly over colleges. Again, in Europe, I grew up in Europe for part of my childhood. My parents went to college in Europe. As far as the college system, it's very simple. It's very similar Eastern and Western Europe. You go to college. You're there for exactly 4 years. There's no 5-year plan, 6-year plan. I went part-time to have a job. No, there's none of that. You go in, you declare your major before you even go in. When you apply, that's the major you're in. There's an exact number of slots for each major. You have most of your classes, most of your course load is predetermined when you take what. You maybe have 1 or 2 electives here and there. And when you graduate, you have to graduate on time. You actually, a lot of them get paid to go to college. They get stipends. Mm-hmm. But it's actually, you're not there for 4 years, you're there for 5. It's like usually 4 years. Basically, their undergraduate is the equivalent of our master's, because you have to stay an extra year and write a thesis type deal. But that's not for everything. And when you're done, you typically get job placement. Now, if you can find a job someplace else, that's fine. But if not, you can use their job placement.
So when I heard you describe that, I'm like, okay, let's do it.
Right now, see, I'm not necessarily a fan of that.
Because look at what college is in this country. I mean, I hate to piss on people's parade, but I think college in this country, I think frat guys, drinking, banging chicks. I mean, this is what, like, people, they go to college and just basically have a big drunken party for 4 years. I mean, obviously not everybody's like that.
I agree with you, but here's the thing.
But
turn off student loans and 80% of it will be gone.
And that's the thing. It's like, then they get out, they have a degree that's not worth shit, and then they have, $50,000 in debt. It's like, what the fuck did I do for the last 4 years? I think that people in this country,
I was drunk.
I think that's the problem. We're regulated in ways we think we're free.
Wait, Joe, 4 years, really?
Well, whatever. Anyway,
I know people. Hold on 1 second. I know people now that have taken 4 years just to get through community college to transfer.
Which is supposed to be 2. Yeah.
Right. It's 4 years at a freaking community college. Let that sink in. And we have to remember that with student loans, when the prices are this high, and no one's actually paying them out of pocket, colleges actually have an incentive to keep you there longer.
Right, yeah, well, they don't care, it's tuition.
And they don't have to fail you for this. It's just arranging schedules so you can't take the 2 prereqs for the class you need at the same time. Simple as that. This is not hard to do. So over there, because you have this, in Europe, you have this very rigid bureaucratic system. And if you start failing your classes, you're out of there. You're flunked out. You are never coming back. If you do stupid shit like what you're describing, getting drunk, people get kicked out of college all the time. My dad, now granted, this is a long time ago, his college class started out, they had 30 people in his class, in his track for his major. You know how many graduated?
10?
7.
That was close.
Okay, you see my point, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty extreme because he went to a very high-level school. But
so that's normal. I mean, when you think of any really skilled profession, a lot of them are going to wash out and not make it.
Right. Well, this is right. So, and it's a master's. You have to write a thesis. Keep that in mind. But this here, what we're talking about is basically everyone can go to college. There's absolutely no control. There's no rules. When you want to talk about socialism requires recourse.
Mm-hmm.
There is no recourse at all. It's just, okay, whatever you want to do, the government's going to pay for it. Maybe that's not what Bernie's thinking, but that's what his platform says. And that's why it scares me.
Well, and I think just in a theoretical discussion, we're free in the ways, we're regulated in a lot of ways we think we're free, and then we're free in ways we think we're regulated. And maybe some of those should kind of be flip-flopped. Like, there's just this freedom to just go to college, not do shit, spend all this money, and then you get spit out with or without a career and all this debt. Maybe there should be more direction imposed on these kids when they come in. And that's something that I enforced on myself. I could have just as easily, and I think you remember this, I had this whole thing picked out where I was going to go live in Arizona, where I am right now recording this show, go to ASU. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I thought, well, that's what you do. I'm 18, I'm going to go to college. And that's just...
What was that movie that said, I'm going to college because that's what people do after high school? I think it was Orange County. It's some dumb teenage movie. But
you go and, when you don't know what you do nothing. You party and you get drunk. That's what you do. So...
And you're paying thousands of dollars a year.
And I ended up having to pay to go to school, but I paid, it was way less than a lot of these kids are paying now. And I actually got a profession, a career that I picked, that I knew I was good at, that I'm still in. So, I mean, obviously that's one example.
You also went in your mid-20s.
Right. Because I didn't know what I wanted to do before that.
Here's the thing. I feel like the best regulation on this is the free market. You have to pay for it yourself. If you have to pay for it yourself, it's amazing how fast people start thinking about this. And I think, honestly, a really big elephant in the room that we rarely talk about, and people think as a libertarian, I'm not going to say this, but I'll say it all day long, is debt.
Oh no, debt is horrible right now for college, especially.
It's not just right now. It's been around for. You have personal experience with this, where banks know they're going to get bailed out. They know they can't. They're too big to fail. So they have absolutely no incentive to actually think about who they're giving money to.
They just leverage themselves all to hell, yeah.
Right, and this is... Okay, so here's the thing. Okay, this is a very free market, very libertarian approach to banking. If you're a bank... Your bread and butter is loans. You give out loans, and then you collect interest on the loans. That's how you make a profit. Hence, if you give a loan to the wrong person and they can't pay you back, that's your problem.
Yeah.
You fucked up. Now, you can hit that person's credit history. That's fine if you want to do that. But you still fucked up. It's really not that different as any other business, right? Picking clients that can't pay. Think about this. If I'm a plumber, I don't know why I'm hitting plumbers so much today, and I start going and fixing people's toilets, and they have no money to pay me, who's going to have a problem? They're going to have a toilet that's fixed, and I just work for free.
I know why. I know why I'm going to speculate why you're thinking plumbers, because you were thinking the Republican debate and what a shit show it was. So, shit show, toilet, plumber. Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
Okay,
what is Donald but the giant hairy clog in the drain that is our political system, right?
And then you got these two kids trying to take it out with toothpicks. Yeah. This
is why you listen to our show, ladies and gentlemen. This is the hard-hitting analysis that only we can provide. The right? Toilet clogging Donald Trump.
Right. So,
oh my God.
Debt, just the enabling of people through debt. And again, how do we beat that, Joe? How do we stop that from happening?
How about we throw some bankers in jail and see what happens then? I don't know.
Well, now, what are they going to jail for?
Fraud?
What crime have they committed?
I don't know. There was a lot of bullshit that went on during '08 that people are still asking, why aren't they in jail?
Oh, no. They committed crimes. That wasn't a rhetorical question. I want you to actually tell me.
Well, I mean, if you're using '08 as an example, it was... who's seen The Big Short? I'm asking this to our audience. If you've seen The Big Short, very interesting watching that movie, where these frat boy idiots who didn't know what they wanted to do and didn't have a career, like literally they were selling, fitness memberships one day, and they were working as mortgage brokers the next, because you could go through like a 2-hour, 3-hour, 4-hour class, boom, you're a mortgage broker, and your only skill set at that point was, can you have someone fill out a form and sign it, and then submit it, and then bam, you're making commissions. So there was it was a free-for-all. And the banks were at the top basically going, more loans, because they're just, making money hand over fist with all these derivatives. And it didn't matter where they came from. So you have the liar loans, the no documentation loans. And my dad tried to go back into the mortgage business, and there's a whole personal history here that I'm not going to get into. But, he had a history of not keeping jobs for very long. It was just his thing. So when we were out here in Arizona trying to make a go of it, to kind of start over cheaper housing prices, whatever, he was trying to work as a mortgage broker in 2001, right after 9/11, when they dropped all the interest rates. And that's when all this crap started. And he kept coming back from work going, I don't know what the hell is going on, compared to 5-6 years ago when I did this job. There's all these new guys. They're pushing loans on people. They're trying to finance people up to the eyeballs that they can't afford. And they're not even asking for income. They're not doing this. He was very anal and meticulous, just like I am. No, it's you're not getting this loan if you can't afford it. You're not getting this if you don't have this document, that document. He was very precise. And this whole new thing of, it doesn't matter, just sign him, was just abhorrent to him. He was like, what the fuck is going on? And he ended up having to quit because it was just so crazy. That was 2001. This shit went on for 7 more years before the bottom dropped out. But it was how the hell did anyone with half a brain think that was even going to sustain itself for even a little bit?
What enabled the banks to do that? Because in a free market system, if you do that as a bank, you're going to make good money for a little bit. And then you're going to collapse. You're going to go bankrupt when all those loans go into default. Reasonably speaking, like I said, it's like fixing toilets for free.
There's a couple of... it depends on who you ask politically. They have a couple of answers. Someone like Bernie would say, well, we repealed GlassSteagall. That's one.
Okay, so GlassSteagall, let's talk about that really quickly. Let's not assume anybody knows what we're talking about. Basically, the keynote, by the way, not all of GlassSteagall was repealed, but the keynote kind of factor in GlassSteagall that was repealed, by the way, by Bill Clinton.
By Clinton, yes, in 98, yeah.
Anyone that wants to blame either party, no, it was both.
It was both, yeah, of course, yeah.
And Bill Clinton, I think there's someone related to him running.
I got a bad idea. I can make it shittier. Just remember, that's our political system.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think someone with that last name might be running.
Gee, for president. Yeah. Do you think they're related?
Arkansas, I don't know. So anyway, here's the thing. So what the keynote provision that was repealed is that investment banks are not allowed to be personal banks.
Right. There was a line drawn.
If you have money that you're taking out, that people are giving you, and I believe this includes personal loans. It's not just people that have money in the bank. Then you're not allowed to turn around and invest that money in the stock market.
You can't go to the casino with this money over here, yeah.
separating.
You're either a casino or you're a loan provider, not both. Yeah.
Because, see, that already happened once. It was called the Great Depression.
Yes.
And GlassSteagall.
Where that law came from, yeah.
Right. They were two Democratic senators in the 1930s that passed this law post-Great Depression. And the idea was to regulate the banks from doing this, exactly what they did in 2001 through 2007. And the reason for that was that the banks are not stupid. And they realize there's so few of them and they're so large that if they do that with people's personal money, with their savings account, their money market accounts, their mutual funds and whatnot, when they start to collapse, the government will have no choice but to bail them out.
Which is what happened.
Otherwise, everyone's savings are gone. Now, I was in favor of letting them collapse regardless because it would teach humanity a lesson never to do that again.
I was too,
So
even though most people on both sides are like, well, yeah, but what would have happened as a result? And I'm like, well, we'll never know.
I really don't think it would have been as bad as people like to say it would be. But let's not even get into that. My point is, that was the law. Now, there are still laws that restrict what they can do. That's only one restriction, and many of them were still in place, and they were broken over and over and over. For one, okay, you cannot just give out loans. There are a lot of provisions as far as, like, forget the names for these things, but
Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac,
reserve. Sorry?
Oh, you're talking about, fractional reserve banking, things like that.
Reserve and, like, basically how much you can do this with. There's qualitative restrictions if you do A and you can't do B. There's also quantitative restrictions. If you have this much in reserve, you can only invest this much, give this much in loans, this much risk and whatnot.
Well, there were plenty of, kind of loopholes along the way there with a lot of those laws.
I wouldn't even call them loopholes. They just flatly broke the law, and the Federal Reserve enabled it by printing more money to give to them.
Well, when you have the former head of Goldman Sachs running the Treasury, of course he was at the end. He was, actually I take that back, he was there to make sure that they didn't actually fail when everything collapsed. hard not to see a little bit of conspiracy there,
Right. It's not really a conspiracy. Conspiracies are hidden. This is way out in the open. Plus, there was all that discriminatory lending.
Oh, yeah.
Which, I don't know why all these liberals that are always screaming about Black Lives Matter, why are you not screaming about discriminatory lending practices? Because I can't think of a thing more devastating and more racist. You need loans in this country to do anything.
Still happens, too.
Oh, it hasn't gone anywhere, because when you give a corporation like Wells Fargo a $2 billion fine, their executives are like, hey, John, are you paying? No, it's your turn to pay it, man. It's your turn to pay it.
Yeah, it's like they just... All the executive board members, they look around at each other and they pick one to turn out his pockets, and the $2 billion just falls out of his.
And he's like, "Damn it, guys! I did it last time.
All right, I'll do it this time, but next time I'm." God.
Right.
Yeah, it's not funny though.
When J.P. Morgan Chase got theirs, and it was actually a little bit more. It was like $13 billion. I think my joke was they're going to set up a donation jar in the executive bathroom.
Basically, yeah.
This is ridiculous. So we have these laws still, even though we've repealed them and even though some of them are weaker than they should be. We have these laws. Nobody enforces them.
No.
So Bernie Sanders' way is to say, okay, let's tighten these laws. Let's make them work. Let's enforce
and gee,
them.
let's actually enforce them. Yeah. Novel concept.
Talking about breaking up the banks for the same reason. Now, we want to talk about democratic socialism, right? Look at Europe and tell me if that's working over there, because that's exactly the system they have. The only difference is we have an independent central bank, whereas they have government-run central banks, which matters, but for the purposes of what we're talking about, more or less what the system Bernie's suggesting is actually pretty similar. But you can toot their healthcare system and their educational system as being better than ours. Their banking system, though?
Well, I think that... I don't know that how fully he wants to commit to that sort of a system. I mean, I think he still ultimately wants to, have things be private. It's just, actually prosecuting these fuckers when they break the law.
Their banks are totally private. The only thing that's not private is their central banks.
What's interesting is that he and Rand would hold hand in hand and want to audit the Fed. That is kind of interesting about Bernie.
Right. So then the other way to do this, the Ron Paul way to do this, the Rand Paul way to do this, is just say, you know what? We're getting rid of the Federal Reserve. And we're getting rid of all these restrictions. But if you as a bank, if you make poor choices, you're going to go bankrupt. You're going to go bankrupt. We're not going to save you. You understand that, right?
Yeah, and the TARP, by the way, was the the bailout that we knew about, the real bailout was the Fed. I mean, that was the...
Oh, yeah.
There were trillions that went out, really, because of their policies.
Yeah. Now, there are countries, for example, one example I always see libertarians bring up, interestingly, Iceland.
Yes, Michael Moore just addresses that in his movie, actually.
Right. Where they
locked their bankers up.
Like, the executives of every major
Yes, they
bank.
did.
And it's like, I would love to see the executives of Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan Chase just be marched off in prison clothes. Like, those guys deserve it. There's no...
And they've been doing well since
federal prison.
the crash. They've been doing well. Well, gee, they locked their fucking bankers up. So wait, the guy that was in charge of flushing everything down the toilet is no longer in charge, and they're doing better for it? Wow.
I know. Can you imagine that's such interesting. A thing? I mean...
I never thought of it that way. Gee, the guy who fucked up, taking him away from being able to fuck up again. I just never thought of that.
Right. Now, here's the problem here's the problem with comparing us to that country. Do you know how many people live in Iceland?
I'm guessing that there are about 10 times more people in the Southern California area at a minimum.
Okay, so 10 times more. No, Joe. There's about 50 times more. Well, no, more than that even. So Iceland is a country, according to the 2013 World Bank statistics, 323,000 people.
Ah, well, that's like the upper Temecula-Murrieta area has more people than that, doesn't it?
Yes. So, you see what I'm saying about smaller local places where there's fewer people and they're extremely homogenous.
True.
Because it's a little island.
Still, locking up bankers is a good idea, though. Small or big.
It is, but the reason it worked there is because you have 323,000 people, and you had 322,000, 879 of them pick up sticks.
Well, I still think...
And walk over to the banks and be like, okay!
Look at it this way, though. There are only, let's say, about a dozen scum fucks, in charge of all the major banks. And there's, 349,800,000. If we all picked up sticks... went into the bank,
it's called...
There'd be a lot more of them,
action problem.
Yeah.
It's actually a lot easier for the banks to manipulate 323 million people than 323,000. I don't know why that's so difficult for people to understand. The democracy gets messier and it gets less representative as it gets bigger. It seems like common sense to me, but maybe it's not to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look at local politicians, I follow local politics a lot. I don't talk about it on the show because this is a national show. But I follow local politics. I've done a lot of work in local politics. And I can tell you, you cannot get away with 1/5 of the shit in local politics that you get away with in state and federal politics.
San Diego is a lot dirtier a place politically than people think, too, not to mention.
Oh, San Diego is awful, but here's the thing. Once a scandal hits, you're done. And San Diego, here's the thing. San Diego is a big city. In terms of actually, we think of a lot of big cities, but they're not really that big. Like Los Angeles is actually relatively small. It's just the area around it that's huge, but politically speaking, how many voters are actually voting in the city of Los Angeles? San Diego is huge and it's very diverse. So a lot of the corruption here, again, comes from that. Because if you piss off one segment of the population, you could just rely on another to elect you. Whereas if you're looking at like smaller cities, you're done. Once you fuck up, you're done. You have nowhere to go.
I guess Filner found that out.
Well, Filner, no, it's Filner.
No one who's not San Diego may know, but he may have hit national news at some point.
No, so I can fill our listeners in on this. So Bob Filner was actually a Democratic U.S. congressman for about 16 years from San Diego. And he decided to resign from Congress and run for mayor. He was 72 years old. He won by a very, very small margin.
Think Kasich, only he ran for mayor instead of governor. Kind of the same thing. Anyways.
Basically. But within a few months, he was accused of sexual harassment, I believe.
And actually touching or.
Right, and molestation, sexual molestation, and then it was actually Democrats. I know a lot of the people that were involved in this. It was Democrats, at the city level, Democratic politicians, who were some of his closest allies, who basically stepped up and said, Bob, you need to step down.
His own party lynched him. Yeah, it was very interesting.
Yeah, they destroyed him, and all these women started coming out and saying that just basically he was being a creepy old man. He's 72 years old. Now, he's a good-looking guy. He doesn't look 72, but that's not the point. Just going to city employees, not even other politicians, city employees, and flirting with them and like inviting them to dinner. He's a single guy.
It sounded like he was just acting like your average character in Mad Men or something like that.
Right, but then as soon as they're like if they tried to like turn him down, they'd be like, "But I'm the mayor." So he's like trying to use the fact that he's the mayor to get in all these women's pants, and it just kept going. Like it kept getting worse. Like, whoa, dude,
like
you're
the 8th woman, the 9th woman, the 10th woman. It's like, Jesus Christ, dude.
Where does it stop? But I think this makes my point. Is my impression. You don't just as a social worker, as a psych professional, you don't get this way in one day. You don't just become mayor and decide you're going to do this at the age of 72.
Yeah, how many Washington cocktail waitresses was he making moves on, right?
That he was doing this shit nonstop in DC because the culture in DC is just disgusting with these.
Men are pigs out there. Yeah.
It's not just men. No. It's just this culture in general. Just the DC is just the. Was it? I think it was Ron Paul that said there are more threats to liberty within a 3-mile radius of DC or something like that than the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And so he got so spoiled by that culture that when he came back to the city level, he didn't realize that that's not going to fly.
You mean you can't just proposition every woman you run into every day and they'll just do it because maybe they're angling for a job later on?
Right. I was like, hey, I'm the congressman, right? It's just,
I guess it's kind of like Vegas where it's like everyone's hustling something, Everyone. Not, there's no just bit players. Everyone's trying to twist everything around and get something for themselves later, aren't they? They're running a game.
I like that. I like that analogy that it's like Vegas.
There's just lots of pimps, hookers, and gamblers hanging around everywhere. A lot of no good nicks and hangers on and scum suckers and stuff. Yeah, all looking for an angle. So if anything, Trump would fit right in. Sadly enough,
right. That's definitely true.
That just all he's doing is switching which desk. And we were talking last time about switching desks. It's like he just would be in the other desk. He's the president now.
Oh yeah. So in any case, I think I kind of understand, honestly. I'm looking at this and I understand why Bernie Sanders is burning out. No pun intended.
Burning out, yeah, haha.
Burning out, yes, no pun intended. Because, yes, all this anti-establishment rage, especially within the Democratic Party, it was good for a while. But now people are actually starting to take him seriously. And, he's got a very different demographic he's appealing to than, say, Donald Trump, right?
Even though, oddly enough, people keep drawing similarities to them because they're both sort of outsiders of their own party and decrying the status quo.
Let's talk about the difference. Okay, I'm really going to be disgusting. I'm going to piss off a lot of people, but I want to say this. Let's draw a little bit of a contrast between the supporters of Bernie Sanders and the supporters of Donald Trump. Who supports Bernie Sanders?
I think young people, college students, people like that.
Right.
Really liberal people.
People that have, read a book sometime in their lives?
Yes, they are trending to be educated too, yes.
Right. And people who have, maybe traveled to another country here and there?
Possibly.
Right. So they're looking at this and, their rage at this point is being replaced by just seeing that his proposals are not sustainable, that it's insane. Even though his wanting to stand up to the system is good, what he's proposing is not going to work. Now, who supports Donald Trump?
Let's see. I think uneducated people, white supremacist types, which actually that's true.
Trailer park dwellers, construction
basically
workers.
A lot of people who just say shit and have like offensive bumper stickers and are kind of like, hey, fuck you if you can't take it kind of folks. Yeah.
Right. Didn't he say in Nevada when he won that he loves the poorly educated?
Yeah, he did.
I'm sure you do, Donald.
Yeah, I'm sure he does.
I'm sure they love you.
He would not have a political career if not for he would not have a television career if not for them. He would not have a university career, which thank God somebody finally brought that up. Why did it take them 10 debates to talk about his fucking university? God almighty. There's more shit on this guy. I mean, they haven't even gotten started in that last debate with all the shit they brought up.
So, again, I feel like that's not going to work. I feel like they have to yell at him and be mean and be assholes to him to break him down. Because his followers, his supporters, don't care.
They're the same idiots that he's been swindling and fleecing for the last 20 years. I mean, it just makes complete sense that they would elect him their king. I mean, he obviously has proven he's better than them. He takes their money against their own will, and he makes them enjoy giving it to him. So, yeah, well, hey, you should be in charge, right?
I saw a hilarious blog post. It's a joke. I don't believe in it myself, but it was a hilarious blog post about Donald Trump. And it's basically, it was pitched, this is a while ago, a few months ago, pitching the conspiracy theory that he's just doing this to build up his television career and basically to make himself more of a celebrity. I don't know if I believe that.
I think that was more of a line back last summer when he started, not now that he's serious.
Right. And they were saying this guy, they're just explaining why he's being stupid. And they made the analogy to Nigerian, those scams that you get in your email?
The Nigerian prince email, yeah.
Nigerian prince that, there's a bunch of money sitting in a container and we'll share it 50-50, but first you got to give me $10,000 to pay the taxes.
Yeah.
And there are tens of thousands of stupid Americans every year that fall for that
Donald
shit.
Trump has some swampland in Florida he'd like to sell you if you are believing this.
So, it's the same shit. So the point that this blog post made was that those emails are always misspelled. They have terrible spelling and punctuation. They make no sense. And he reminds you that you know what language they speak in Nigeria?
I'm guessing it's not Nigerian.
English. So the people who are writing this shit, if they're really from Nigeria, they're writing in their native language. Why is every email misspelled and mispunctuated? And the case that this blog post makes is that they want to filter out people that are too smart to fall for this. They want to target the idiots that are still going to be okay with it despite it being misspelled and just the dumbest shit in the world.
Whereas you and me, we read it and we're like, who would fall for this crap? And it's like, well, indeed, right? Not us.
So when Donald Trump makes his presidential pitch and he's being a bully and he's being an idiot and he's not saying anything substantive, he's targeting a very specific demographic. Because people that are smart enough to question the shit he's saying aren't going to vote for him anyway.
Right. And I know Republicans, and not one Republican friend I have supports Trump. Not one.
Oh, yeah, me neither, but I've heard of a lot
and everyone
of
I know is Republican, is college educated, has a job, and it requires knowledge, They're not... I mean, I'm not casting aspersions, but they're not some educated guy who cleans toilets for a living. I mean, it's, let's be real here.
Yeah. So,
we need toilet cleaners, don't get me wrong, but anyway.
They deserve health care. It's scary, just the number of Americans that falls into this category of Trump supporters. It really is.
Yeah.
It just shows you why we cannot have unchecked democracy in this country.
Actually, yes.
Really
That's
is.
what has been scary, though, seeing the how he brought together all kind of the worst aspects, maybe, of our culture.
Right, but nevertheless, I wouldn't care, honestly, if we had a half-decent Democrat looking to take the Democratic nomination.
Yet we have Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Right, but if it's looking like, I'm hoping I'm wrong, but it's definitely looking like Bernie's getting destroyed, and it is going to be Hillary.
Yes.
So it's basically, like I said, I can't think of a shittier choice. And didn't I say we weren't going to talk about the election? But here we go. There's nothing else to talk about.
It kind of is the elephant in the room. It's hard not to fear it.
Now, I think we should start wrapping up. We promised each other we'd have a shorter podcast today. But, about 6 or 8 months ago, I posted when the decision on gay marriage came through, and Scalia tantrumed about it and all that. And I posted on Edge of Chaos. I posted a rant saying I agree with the decision. I'm totally for gay marriage and all that. And there was the other one. There was the Burwell ruling about Obamacare, and I forget the details, but it was like they had to rule again in favor of Obamacare because that whole challenge was so ridiculous, right?
Right.
And I said, look, I agree with both rulings. I mean, you can be against Obamacare, but you can't set that kind of precedent. But what I'm saying is this hyper-federalism and just the importance of the presidency and just the increased mob rule. When you have this kind of mob rule and you don't check direct democracy and you basically erode the republic, you have more and more people that are not represented. The whole point of this slow process in a constitutional republic where you can't just do things by direct democracy, it takes a long time, is because that way everyone gets accounted for. And I wrote that, I'm seeing the seeds of discontent. I'm seeing the possibility of another civil war. And, you got upset with me and you admonished me in private saying I'm turning into, what's his name? Alex Jones. Alex
yes.
Jones. I was going to say Michael Jones, but Alex Jones.
Jones.
I'm sorry. But if you look at what's happening with this, can you see how neither President Trump nor President Hillary is going to represent even 40% of the U.S. population?
I would say it's accurate to say that that a president, if elected, would scarcely have seen such a lack of popular support for themselves on day one since, like, Lincoln. And Fort Sumter happened within, a month, there? Right, of him taking office? We were already at war, basically. I didn't realize that until I actually read a book about Lincoln. I always thought there was, like, more of a delay. Basically, the minute he got elected, it was over. That was over. That was it. It's a matter of time.
Right? But if you look at the election and the years leading up to that, what was happening to the parties, it was very similar.
They were all being pulled apart by that issue, yeah.
Right. It was the only election. Actually, it wasn't just that issue that history misrepresents. There's definitely slavery, but it was more to it than that. It was just regional conflict. That election was the only time in U.S. history where we had four major parties.
I was going to say weren't there three, but yeah, you're right, there were four.
Four.
Yeah.
See, three wouldn't make sense. It was two, and they each split in two. Everyone remembers that the Democrats, you had the Northern and the Southern Democrats. Right. Everyone forgets that you also had the Constitutional Union with John Bell. And I always say, when people ask me who I would have voted for if I were alive then, probably for that party.
So you would have lost and been pissed off too then.
They won one state.
Right.
They carried one state.
Right.
For what it's worth. But nevertheless, they were the sanest of the four. So, can you just see, like, now, we're not even splitting in four, we're splitting in five. If you look at these five candidates that are left, I mean, I'm not going to...
Well, you have, I guess if you just divide it into ideological lanes, you have the establishment, big business conservative type lane, which I guess Kasich and possibly Rubio, is sort of representing at this point. You have the evangelical, which is Cruz and Carson sort of are pulling both of those right now.
Right.
And then you have the psychotic, kind of semi-white supremacist, uneducated conservative type, which is Trump.
I would say it's more of a neo-fascist. It's not they're not a white supremacist.
They're not all,
definitely
no.
fascist.
Yeah,
they're disaffected. They're poor people who are... white people can be poor, too.
Right.
And
many are.
Predominantly white.
Sure, definitely, no shortage.
And they are have been very heavily hit by this economic crisis. They don't understand what's going on. They don't understand economics. They don't understand politics. And what's easier in that situation than just to blame the brown people?
Well, and they have, and Hitler has used that same device before. He just blamed the Jews. They were the brown people of those days. And then
they didn't have brown people in Germany. It was
all white. Yeah, you have to start picking and parsing your whites at that point.
I know. It's so difficult.
That's how in this country, when it was more majority white, we were hating Irish people. That was Anyway.
Right. No,
at
absolutely.
one point, yeah, don't forget. And then Democracy, you're right, there is five, so that's three. And the Democrats, you have your obvious two. You have your sort of really kind of conservative-ish libs, they're kind of progressive but not full socialist, and then you have the full socialist. So.
Well, I would say you can even put Hillary with Rubio. Honestly, they're very similar.
They are. But I'm saying there are Democratic voters who maybe agree with her more than him.
Then you have a huge minority of libertarians, and I follow a lot of libertarian circles, and more and more people that I know who are libertarian. Before they're all obviously they're for Rand Paul. He's out. So for a while they kind of split between Cruz and Bernie Sanders. I was definitely on the Bernie Sanders bus with that. But now, honestly, I'm just seeing them say, fuck it. Fuck it, we're going for whoever the Libertarian Party nominates.
Right.
Which, that's not really a third-party run by any stretch of the imagination. Libertarian Party is not going to become a major party just because I know that party and I know how disorganized they are.
They're ridiculous.
If you're getting your hopes up, please don't. It's not going to happen. Gary Johnson's not going to get elected. He's not even going to carry a single state. Not happening, people. But, the thing is this. It may be enough to split people. It may be enough to take a couple of states from someone. Get a different candidate to win in a closer state. See what I'm saying?
It could. You
get a couple 100,000 in a big state, you break that state, you get the wrong guy to win. So, what I'm saying is, you have this divide, and it's completely irreconcilable. And there's a million reasons why it's irreconcilable, but I think the number one reason is just things have gotten so bad, politically and economically, that everyone hates each other. Everyone wants to blame everyone else. It didn't used to be the case. The two major parties, there's always been different elements within each party, but they coalition together. We've come to a point where we can't do that. And, and I know a lot of people in the Democratic Party who are just desperately trying to keep the Bernie people and the Hillary people together. That's not going to work.
It's not working, yeah. The harder they try, the more they're pushing
2012.
Bernie people away from them.
Look at 2012. Look at Romney versus Ron Paul. Not even going to worry about Rick Santorum. And tell me if that worked. Oh, we need party unity. Fuck you! And there we go.
And did he get elected? Yeah, no, he did not. So
right.
There you go.
So I feel like, I hate to say this. I'm not advocating this. I'm just pointing out what's going on. We really are on the verge of some very bad things happening in this country. I don't know about full-on war, just because there's not like a regional, war is a regional thing. But it's already starting to happen, right? You have like the Black Lives Matter protests where people get hurt and there's just police brutality and all that. And you had the second Bundy protest, which was like, you guys really? You're that disorganized? They're pretty organized for a while and then just, really? I don't get it. But anyway.
Well,
so
being idiots didn't help them. But anyhow.
Okay, but this kind of thing, this is just the beginning. We're really standing on the verge of massive political and sociocultural change here. And it's just, like I said, things have gotten so bad, everybody hates each other.
It does seem to be that way. I'm already evaluating my options abroad. Seriously.
Where might you go?
You know what was interesting? It was interesting. Hit the news that Canada just made it just a little bit easier to become a citizen of Canada recently, anticipating a Trump election. It's kind of funny.
Oh, come on.
You could do worse.
I don't know a whole lot about Canada politically, but I can tell that Europe is going to make the U.S. look like paradise.
That's what scares me. I don't know. President Trump may change that, but...
No, because President Trump still has to deal with Congress. He still has to deal with the Supreme Court. He's not going to be able to do as much as he claims.
Okay, let it sink in. Trump potentially picking 2 to 3 Supreme Court justices and then go from there.
But Senate has to approve, or what's the word? Confirm them.
Yeah, the Senate's majority Republican, so...
That doesn't mean they're going to confirm Trump's appointees, Joe.
I think Trump, by the way, is going to be more liberal than people think, but that's another podcast.
Oh, he's not. Yeah, he's really not all that conservative. He's kind of like a neocon with a little bit of a libertarian streak, but not very much.
It's his overall fascism and wanting to get things done a certain way that's really the scary part.
It is.
Anyhow.
So, like I said, you're considering citizenship abroad, but like I'm looking at the moon.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey,
honestly, I have citizenship abroad. I could live in the British Virgin Islands if I wanted to, but
Okay.
I don't know how productive that is.
It's like, hey, Newt Gingrich, you were talking about that moon colony.
What's involved
in Florida
specifically?
So, you still in business?
You got the plans drawn up yet?
Still looking to do this, man?
Got the plans drawn up yet? And then you go to Richard Branson or Elon Musk. Yeah, so you guys are launching spaceships now, right? Do you take passengers yet, or when's that first flight blasting off there, buddy?
Anywhere to go, and we've talked about this quite a bit, and I kind of want to wrap the show up on this. It's a little bit of a, it's a little bit of a doom and gloom thing, but we tend to do this a lot. Oh, but before that, even one positive: we lost Jeb Bush.
Please clap.
We lost Jeb Bush. At least we're not getting another Bush in the White House.
I never thought I'd hate an election that I was warning you guys all about of Bush v. Clinton again more than Clinton v. Trump, but somehow, yeah. It's like, I'm glad we're not getting Clinton Bush, but Clinton Trump. Did I want that instead? No, I did not. So, right. Yeah.
So, that being said, okay, we've done whole shows on global politics, and I feel like it doesn't really sell because most of our listeners are American. But I'm looking at the Mediterranean. I'm looking at the Balkans. And it terrifies me what's going on there right now. And it terrifies me not for the reasons that people think. It's not because of the human rights violations and the murders, because that shit's normal. When you learn about international relations, you really become desensitized to that. It's because of just the horrifying similarity to what was going on about 100 years ago in the same place before an event called World War I.
Yes.
And if you look at, you had this weakening Ottoman Empire, and you had the Russian Empire basically free 3 states from it that are all Eastern Orthodox: Greece, Bulgaria, and Serbia. So I would draw the parallel between that and the Ottoman Empire then and modern-day Russia, where their satellites, Ukraine, Syria, Libya, are just dropping like flies. And everyone's got their hands in it, right? NATO, Saudi Arabia, Iran, everyone's trying to get in on their piece of the pie. So when I talk about the possibility of another world war, it's not going to be between Russia and NATO. Russia's weak. They're done. I'm surprised they haven't collapsed already. We made that bet with Brian and I lost. Just because it hasn't happened soon enough. But it's happening.
Things aren't going well for them. The low energy prices are really killing them too.
Right. But when Russia goes away, everyone's going to start picking over the parts. Everyone's going to start fighting over the parts of it. You know, if you look at the year 1900, all those European states, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Russia back then, Britain, France, they were all united against the Ottoman Empire. That was the common enemy.
Yeah, true.
What happened? What happened?
Some guy got shot.
But some guy that wasn't just random. Where did that guy come from that shot him? Serbia.
Yeah.
Right? So, and he went to Austria-Hungary. So, this is the kind of thing, when you talk about there being other places in the world to go to that are safe, I really think we are heading for the kind of global crisis that you could say we've had before, honestly. I mean, there's the 30 Years' War, the 100 Years' War, the fall of Rome. You know, we start picking through history.
There's been some times,
it's really nothing new. Right.
Where shit sucked for a long time, yeah.
It's just, we don't learn. You know, in every era,
Definitely.
Humanity thinks, oh, that's in the past. That was when people were savages.
Not really, no. Like George Carlin said, we're barely out of the jungle in this culture.
We're still operating out of the lower brain.
Yeah.
Right? And I just, you know, it scares me. It makes me happy that I'm here in the U.S. and not someplace else. Thanks, Mom. But, you know, it's still, like I said, when you talk about renouncing U.S. citizenship, where would you go?
What's interesting is 2015 had a peak high of renunciations. It was like something like 4,500 or something like that, renunciations.
That's garbage.
And people are just fleeing here in droves. Interesting. I'd like to survey on like where they go. That'd be interesting. I want to look into that.
Now, another thing I want to remind people of, just another little global reminder. During that same time, during World War I, there was an absolutely brutal civil war going on in Mexico that entire time.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
Right? There were 10, like, at that time, it held the record for youngest soldiers. There's like 10-year-olds that were fighting in that war. That's how bad it got.
Yeah, that kind of gets overlooked, doesn't it?
Take a look at Mexico. Take a look at what's going on over there and tell me they're not on the verge of that again.
Oh, could be.
All those cartel wars, El Chapo. We're sitting on a powder keg. And I feel like I'm shocked that no one notices.
Well, it's
Everyone's
like a frog
busy.
on a hot plate. They don't realize it until it's too late.
I feel like everyone's too busy marching under the banner of their guy or girl, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, thinking this is the guy that's going to save us. No, he's not.
Right.
He's part of the problem. And it's just you're choosing which banner you're going to die under. So I just, it really, I hate to be glooming it up again because I think we get to this point at the end of every show.
Well, when you're in strange times, I guess.
I don't know that this is strange times. I just feel like it's a crisis. It's it's a time of change, and
change is messy.
Look at we can look at past times of change. You won't like it, but you'll understand what's coming.
Like good comes from it, but yeah, the period of change is very tumultuous, very chaotic, and a lot of people don't make it through that period of change.
World War II gets put on this pedestal.
People forget how devastating World War I was. World War II gets pedestalized because of the Holocaust. It was such an egregious, honestly, horrible thing.
Who was the most brutal regime in World War II in terms of Holocaust? I'll give you a hint. It was not the
Soviet
Nazis.
Union.
No. The other one.
Really?
Japan.
Oh, of course. Right.
The Japanese did... They just basically raped all of Southeast Asia, like literally.
Yeah, they looked at what Germany was doing like, you think that's atrocity? Oh, we'll show you atrocity over here. Yeah.
I mean, okay, hangings, gas chambers,
Unit 731,
and firing squads.
Like, they had one guy, the Nazis that was doing the experiments. The Japanese had a whole unit that was doing that shit.
I mean,
yeah.
you had again, gas chambers, hangings, and firing squads. Now, of course, they were doing it to people that were completely innocent.
Right.
But those are still considered humane methods of execution to this day.
The whole rape of Nanking thing, which they still deny, and yeah.
Right, and burying people alive. I mean, the Japanese, they got medieval.
There were no slouches, yeah, and the fucked up shit.
They were not fucking around.
No.
And
I love how, by the way, when the war ended, we basically took the worst of both sides, Germany and Japan, and basically yeah, you guys can come work for us now, right? Okay, cool, yeah.
Well, there's that. But why don't you ever learn about Japan in history?
Well, because they're our buddies now. We don't want to shit on them, I guess.
Well, Germany's our buddies too. No, that's not it. I think it's because it's an embarrassment. This shit was going on for 10 years. They started in 1931 in Asia. In Manchuria.
That's true. People always cite 39, the Polish invasion, by Germany as the start of the war. You're right. No, the Japanese shit started way earlier than that.
Because all those damn brown people in Southeast Asia don't matter, right?
Not until white people invaded white people. So now shit's going on, right?
So we sat here with our thumbs up our asses, letting this go on for 10 years. And then we were surprised by Pearl Harbor, by the way. Have you been looking in that direction for the last 10 years? Or,
not really.
Right? So we don't want to acknowledge this because it's embarrassing. It looks bad. It really makes it difficult to make the argument that we went in for human rights.
Right.
And then even when you hear about the Holocaust, what's the number associated with the Holocaust? How many
6
victims?
6 million.
Bullshit.
Which is 6 million Jews, but there were gays, there were Slavs, there were
the Jews.
There was disabled, mentally, physically disabled. There were all kinds of people killed.
Okay, well, hold on. So there were about 13 million victims total, just the Holocaust.
Right.
About half of them were Jews. And then, okay, so here's the thing. Killing Jews is bad. Now, I'm a Jew, so yeah, I agree. Killing Jews is bad, okay? Everyone can agree killing Jews is bad. But when you're killing homosexuals, 1940s, that's okay.
Right. That wasn't a big deal.
Disabled people... mentally ill. We were herding them into concentration camps here in the U.S. at the same time, castrating them and detoothing them.
Right.
So you can't really bomb someone for doing what you're doing. Black people, there weren't a lot of them in Europe. That was another one. Well, we had Jim Crow here.
Yeah.
You see where I'm going with this, John?
I think so.
Right? And the reason I bring this up is because even when we look at history, there's so much revision. There's so much that's omitted that you really have to go read it for yourself.
Totally.
But when you do, you'll realize, no, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. And then, World War I, as Joe accurately pointed out, except with the exception of the Holocaust, makes World War II look like child's play.
It was devastating. So many people died in that war. And so many people were fucked up mentally in that war, fucked up physically in that war. It was ridiculous. And I'm just reading now, by the way, The Rise and the Fall of the Third Reich. Boy, that did not come out of nowhere. That's very interesting to read about where all of that anti-Semitism and, Nazism, where that came from. Lots of seeds to that went back 20, 30, 40 years in some cases.
Oh, yeah.
Guys that were writing in the 1880s and 1890s and shit, where some of the things that Hitler read was oh, that's a good idea, I'll incorporate that. It's wow, there was a lot of seeds to that.
Well, and I mean the USSR, too. We have to remember that the USSR was an Axis power at the beginning of World War II.
Right. Well, the non-aggression pact, yeah.
Well, no, they were an Axis power. They switched over when Hitler attacked them.
Right, that's what I mean.
So, where Stalin came from and some of his influences as well. So you're right, it goes both ways. Anyway, I don't need to see the need to get into all of that on this show. We can do a different show on that. But this mass ignorance is really the problem here. And that's why I want to bring up all these facts of economics, of education, of healthcare, of banking. And even though I think everyone knows my positions by this point, I'm not even trying to take positions so much as just educate people and show this is how this really works. And if it's too complicated, if you're going to say, well, it's too complicated, then don't fucking vote. I'm sorry.
Luckily we can't restrict people from voting, but yeah, you're just saying
I'm not trying to restrict them, But I'm saying, if you don't understand it, why are you trying to participate?
Because I want to elect Trump. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Exactly. I think that right there, that could be the end of the show, because that illustrates my point.
I think it does.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for being with us. I'm Neurotoxin.
I'm Joe Ryan. Thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to The Edge of Chaos. We can be found on the internet at edgeofchaospodcast.com. That's edgeofchaospodcast.com. Contact the show, edgeofchaospodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at edgeofchaosshow. We can also be found on Facebook at facebook.com/The Edge of Chaos. Neurotoxin's blog can be found at neurotoxins with an S, fyg.blogspot.com. For Neurotoxin, this is Joe Ryan. Thank you for listening to The Edge of Chaos.